I think that we can start our conversation. And my first question about your visit in Russia is this first visit?
It's my first visit to Russia.
And what do you think about Russia, and what is your first impression?
My first impression is that it's beautiful and the people are all very kind. I was buying for my wife, she asked for it, a Matryoshka doll, and I was at a kiosk and a stranger walked by and helped me and helped lower the price for me, just out of nowhere. So I found everyone very pleasant and very cheerful.
Okay, and what do you think about St. Petersburg?
It's a very vibrant city, very European. It reminds me of Madrid a lot and of Paris, and a lot of cultural sites that I'm looking forward to getting to see.
Okay. What about atmosphere of St. Petersburg?
The atmosphere?
Atmosphere.
It's very youthful, I think, and it feels like a lot's going on, and that there's a lot to find out about it, a lot of interesting stories in it, it seems.
Could you tell about your academic topic that you study in recent years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I did my dissertation on Plato's Timaeus and Critias, particularly on the notion of doxa, or opinion, in the Timaeus and Critias. And I have looked into that cognitional epistemological aspect of Plato's work and its relation to our knowledge of the sensible world.
Okay, why did you choose this topic?
I chose it because when I first read the Timaeus, it was my first year of graduate work, and when I first read the Timaeus, something jumped out at me, that there was some structure uniting the whole thing, running through it on the subject side and on the object side. And so I devoted my work from that point on to figuring out exactly what that core idea was that Plato was trying to express in that dialogue.
In your opinion, has the studies in the antiquity philosophy a usefulness for modern society?
I think it does for a very particular reason having to do with the period in which the ancients were working and the period in which we're in now. You know, we're sort of in a post-theoretical, post-modern age. I read an article recently that said that no young people read. They don't read books. They just use texts and social media. Just one line. And when you think of the students coming up now, they're not becoming theoreticians. As a culture, we've moved sort of beyond theory. We've seen the end of theory. And so the question is, what's next? And I think on that score, the ancients have a lot we can learn from. Particularly Plato, because he was right on the verge of theory. He saw theory coming, he saw the importance of it, but because he wasn't totally invested in it, he sort of also saw beyond it. And so I think by looking back at the pre-theoretical, before everything got specialized and divided up, we can see a way beyond theory. And another parallel to that is the current interest in interdisciplinarity in the academy, that notion of the interdisciplinary. It's really sort of approximating toward what the original meaning of philosophy was, which is just the pursuit of all knowledge, regardless of what sort of knowledge it is.
Okay, but if we ask a question to the young man about his interests, he says that maybe social media, maybe modern philosophers is interesting for him. Why modern young people should interests in Plato theme?
Well, there's one other thing everyone's always interested in, besides social media and more current thinkers that seem to be exciting and on the verge. It's themselves, you know, they're interested in themselves. And I think with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, you've got this emphasis on self-knowledge and self-exploration and a goal of owning oneself and controlling oneself, being the master of oneself. I know it might not seem like that's what they're up to when a modern young kid reads it. It might not jump out at them, but with a good teacher, maybe they can show that that's what's involved. And I think that will always be of interest, finding out who you are in your particularity.
But some modern philosophers tell about death of the metaphysics, and they tell that Plato or Aristotle is icons of the metaphysics. What do you think about it?
There's a famous line that metaphysics always buries its undertakers. I don't doubt there's problems with the way metaphysics ended up developing, but I don't think you can avoid the ultimate questions. To me, metaphysics is about asking all the questions and finding all the answers. And Plato and Aristotle, sure, they can seem to be stultified, fixed, sort of metaphysical thinkers. But if you look deeply into their works, especially in the dialogues, but you find this in Aristotle too, the basis of their metaphysical thinking isn't just pure speculation or dogmatic assertion. The basis of their metaphysical speculation is that, to me, is that desire to know, that wonder, that when you get down to it is the most intimate, most deepest part of oneself that you're familiar with. Once you recognize it, you think, I knew about that before because it's so close to you. And maybe for the modern young student, we can say you can put metaphysics aside for the time being, forget about it, focus on yourself, find out what you're about, find out what questions you're asking. And then later on you can say, look, you did metaphysics. Yeah.
Okay. Please tell how the modern academia of your country concerns the study of the antiquity philosophy and culture. In other words, what place the studies of the antiquity are holding in the academic world of your country?
Well, it's become very specialized. It's a huge field. You have your experts in the pre-Socratics, your experts in Plato, your experts in Aristotle, your experts in the Hellenists and the Neoplatonists. And it's broken down into the more scholarship side and more philosophical side. So you get great specialty. There can be a sort of problem with that, a drawback, of course, where it doesn't seem like any of it's coming together. But there's all the potential there with all the specialization for a greater synthesis. And ancient philosophy, the study of it, has become in a way a sort of enclave in the broader place of philosophy in the culture. So you wouldn't look to a scholar of Aristotle for contemporary philosophical ideas. But I think that can change, and I hope it will change, and that the students of Greece will start taking on that demand to actually engage with philosophy today and the philosophical ideas and find the current relevance.
Okay, and what do you think about future of the studies in the antiquity philosophy?
Yeah, in education
and education and study, research of.
what I would like it to, how I would like it to go.
How
do I
do you
see it going?
see, yes, future?
Well, I think what I would like to see is a return to sort of the 19th century sort of synthesizing, you know, because we've gotten this specialization and a fear of violating historical norms in the study of these thinkers. And it's very good to avoid anachronism, of course, in studying the ancients and any other thinker. But you shortchange them if you don't think that they were after things that are timeless and universal. And so I see it as heading towards greater syntheses and moving from these more minute, specialized studies to ever greater syntheses. I mean, you see this in Plato studies, where it's, in a lot of ways, it splinters. There's Anglo-American Plato studies. There's the different approaches to the dialogues. Eventually, these studies of particular dialogues will lead, just by the nature of the text themselves, to a more synthetic grasp.
Okay, I understand. Could you tell about your presentation on the conference?
Yeah, my presentation is focused on this anomaly you find in the interpretation of Plato, where, as you were saying earlier, a lot of people read Plato and take Plato to be almost a dogmatic, object-oriented, metaphysical, theoretical thinker. And yet, in the history of his interpretation, key thinkers and philosophers who themselves, through their own work, ushered in this turn to the subject, turn to the interiority of ourselves. They looked to Plato to do it. So the question is, why did they look to Plato, of all people, to do this, if he was a representative of an object-focused metaphysics? And in my paper, I look at how this happens with one particular text in the Republic that's a locus classicus for this metaphysical, theoretical approach in Platonism. And I show that in that text itself, there's a sort of subsurface point there where it's an invitation to turn inward and to approach this subject matter from an interior standpoint rather than a dogmatic, theoretical one.
Okay, thank you. Could you wish something to your Russian colleagues?
Oh, I hope that we have more opportunities like this one in the future, that there's a greater openness between Russia and the West and the US, and more chances for collaboration between our cultures and between our scholars, that we can have more Russians publishing in US outlets and vice versa.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.